What's up, family? Everybody out there on Facebook and YouTube. It's your boy, it's your friend, your nephew, your cousin, all that stuff Kirk Franklin says. I'm Eric J. Thomas, and welcome to Think Tank. As you know, lately I've been doing this every Wednesday around this time, and it's an opportunity for you to come on, be encouraged, be inspired, gain some wisdom, and get to know a little more about whoever my special guest is. And we do a couple of little things. We might prophesy, we might sneak a preach, all kind of stuff like that. So I'm grateful that you guys are here, and I've got my new brother and my friend, Pastor Josh Hart, on all the way from all the way from Louisville, Kentucky, but now residing in Chicago, Illinois.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much and welcome.
Absolutely. It's an honor to be here.
It's an honor to have you, sir. How's your day going?
Good, good. In the middle of this pandemic, you never know what day it is. So I just wake up and say, Lord, what is your will today? Because
Absolutely.
it feels like Friday every day right now. So
Absolutely. It's a good day. It's a good day. So people are coming on. So as you're coming on, put in the comments where you're from, or just say hey, or say what up though, or say whatever you want to say so that we can know that you're on. I'm going to share this again so you guys can come on and tune in and join the conversation. And all of you who are watching today, please go ahead and share it. And we're going to start this conversation off in just a second. Just a second. Now, I am grateful because last week we had Real Talk Kim on. And as you know, those of you who were tuned in last week, Real Talk Kim came on. She inspired us. She helped take us to another level. And even before that, Dr. Bryant helped open our perspective on a lot of things that are going on today. So Dr. Greenbar, thank you so much for tuning in. It's so good to have you on today. Christian, thanks so much for coming on. I'm glad you're excited about it. That means a whole lot. To my sister Deja, thank you so much for coming on. Powerful kingdom voice going on. And then let's see, Ryan, thanks for tuning in, watching all the way from Modesto, California. All y'all in here today, and I like it. You're making me feel good. Y'all making me feel mighty good. So, as you already know, our conversations are never necessarily any more than 30 to 40 minutes. And so we're going to get forward to it. So, but before we begin, Pastor Josh, can you
yes,
do me
sir.
a favor and can you tell the people a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I am a fourth generation preacher, so preaching's in my blood. Um, I have been born and raised in Louisville, and I just recently accepted an assignment for a second campus under the All Nations movement in Chicago. So I pastor in Louisville and Chicago simultaneously. Some amazing people that I miss seeing their faces so much through this time. I'm seeing their hashtags more than I'm seeing their face right now. But yeah, so it's been a journey. I serve under Dr. Matthew Stevenson in the All Nations movement, which is a very forward movement and aggressive kingdom movement. It's been my pleasure just to do my part through all of this in helping people manage this pandemic, manage both pandemics that we're in. The illness and the racial pandemic has been interesting to navigate together. But I love it. I have a beautiful wife of 10 years,
Yeah.
Kimmy Hart. I got three kids that are needing to just go outside for a while. We've been around each other 24/7 for about 3 months now. So, yeah. So they are my pride and joy. We love spending time with them. My daughter loves volleyball. My son loves art. My baby loves to just run around and do anything the other two are doing. So being a dad obviously is one of my favorite things. But I have been a student of leadership for a long time. I'm kind of like Paul, counting out myself to have obtained it. But I'm one that is always posturing myself in the position of a learner, and it's allowed me to be able to sit under a lot of amazing people to just receive insight from their journeys. And you can't pattern your journey after somebody else's journey, but it is a great opportunity for you to learn nuggets that you can use along the way. So,
Absolutely.
so that's been my journey, man. Is that really a consistent student? And that's probably the title that I would give myself more than anything. Yes, I'm a teacher. Yes, I'm a pastor. Yes, I'm a leader. But student is what makes me great at all of those things. so
Absolutely.
so that's a little bit about me.
Shout out to my friend Jonathan. He said you are one of his favorite all nations
All
vessels.
right, that's a lot to choose from. Amen.
So I mean, there's a gang of y'all. There's like a whole gang of y'all from East Coast to West Coast and all the way
Listen.
to Canada and everything else. Y'all probably got people in the backside of Brazil somewhere. I don't know. But again, so grateful and so thankful to have you on. I
Yeah.
know that you have had a journey where you've been pastoring for several years, even
Mhm.
before coming up under the All Nations collective or the movement and being
Yes, sir.
submitted to Apostle Stevenson. Can you tell us a little bit about how you made the decision to make that transition, change the name of your church, and accept this kind of new assignment?
Yeah, absolutely. So my father was my pastor for my entire life. He was the church I served in, all of those things, and it's actually the church in Louisville that I have taken over. But he passed away from cancer in 2009. And at that point, I went on a journey because I am an avid believer of being covered. And so I went on a journey at that point of just finding where I fit, which was very awkward for me because it was the first time that it wasn't natural with my natural father. So I'd never had this question before and never really been on this journey before. Um, so the whole spiritual father thing to me was even a new conversation as well because my spiritual father was my natural father.
Right.
And so figuring out what that was, what was the abuse of it and what was the reality of it, and navigating just through some seasons. And I had a few pit stops on the way to all nations, um, that I learned great things from, but my DNA just didn't really connect with. And I'll be honest, I walked into Fire Conference 2017. Had no idea who Matthew Stevenson was to that point, besides a few periscopes. At that point, he was coming up on Periscope, and I got invited by somebody to come to Fire Conference, which is our basically our gift activation conference. And so I went, and literally on the first night, I was burning like
Mhm.
my heart, but I've already, like I said, been through a couple seasons, so I'm very skeptical at this point.
Right.
um, I get in the car after that first service. Now you got to know my wife to really know the gravity of this statement. She is not the church conference girl. She is not the traditional first lady. We
Right.
got in the car after that service, and she literally looks at me and says, "These are your people."
Mhm.
And those words from her resonated probably more with me than anything because I wanted it to not just be something that was the advancement of me, but that my family could grow in, a segue that or a section that my family could grow in. So I go the next day to the morning session of the conference. You got to think about, I mean, there's thousands of people in this room. Dr. Stevenson points at me in the middle of a crowd, don't know me from nobody, pulls me up on stage. And I don't know if you've heard of Prophet Kevin Leo,
Mhm.
but he starts prophesying to me and literally says, all these other things were pit stops. These are your people. Out of nowhere. So I basically literally get plucked out of the crowd, um, get already what I feel in my spirit confirmed within 24 hours from a prophetic angle. Um, and then from that point, really everything like snowballed. About 8 weeks later, I got a random text from my brother, Brandon Clack. I had known him. He texts me and he says, "You need to answer this next number that calls you. You're not gonna know it." I answer it. It's a FaceTime, and it's Dr. Matthew Stevenson. And at that point, the relationship began to build. I submitted our church under him, just like it was. Um, and just felt that it needed to go further. And I really felt myself attaching to the legacy of not just him, but the All Nations movement. So we transitioned our church in 2018 over to be an All Nations campus. And then in November of last year, took on the assignment of launching Chicago South as well. So I'm doing both and rolling back and forth. So the journey really was it was more the journey to get there that was the hard part than it was actually once I got there. But
Mm.
one thing that I can say, just as a nugget for anybody listening, is any relationship that I've had. I mean, I've had the opportunity, I don't say this as a prideful thing, just as a point of emphasis. I've had the opportunity to sit at a lunch table with Bishop Jakes and just hear his heart, to sit with a lot of just amazing gifts, to be able to hear what their journey was, what their life was, and every single time I can say that I never had to work my way to that table. I never had to backstab my way. I never had to kiss anybody's butt to get to any of those tables. Every single opportunity that was afforded to me came from the position of honoring where I was,
Mm.
honoring the season I was in, honoring the moment I was in. And when I honored those moments and those people that I was connected with opened those doors for me. Every opportunity I've had in the kingdom, I can say this loosely, but I stumbled into it.
Wow.
I fell into and I know we got to have strategy and we got to have plans and we got to have, all those things are necessary. We got to have visions. But every single moment that launched major kingdom shifts in my life, I fell into them.
Wow. And
And
I think
then
that
go ahead.
was, I think that was you. I think that was you just being and operating in the timing and in the movement of God. I think many of
100%.
us, we try to kind of force something to happen, and we just say, hey, I think this is it, and I'm just gonna force my way there. But one thing that I was taught as a boy growing up in church is that what God has for you is absolutely positively for you, and no
Yep.
one can take that away. And that even applies to the circles and the networks and the connections that you make and the things that you find yourself being a part of. God has an appointed time, an appointed plan, and appointed people for us and in our life in order for us to go ultimately to where He's trying to get us to go. I tell people all the time that there is nothing in this world that God will call you to do that you will do 100% by yourself.
Listen.
There there's a group of people that is anointed to help carry you to the next level. That's the reason why we understand that Jesus had 12 disciples. We understand that David even had a team. Saul had a team. Noah had a team. Everybody had a team. Nobody just did anything 100% by themselves. Even
Yep.
Paul, when Paul got started, Paul went back and built the relationship and the bridge between him and the other apostles and established that network and those
Hmm.
relationships so that he could be more legitimized and be furthermore sent out
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
great things. I think people have this mindset and this mentality that I'm just going to do it by myself because I ain't worried about who's with me and who's against me and all that other stuff. You've got to realize that God has appointed somebody in the earth realm to help you get to your next level. So I
Listen.
celebrate you and the amazing journey that you've been on. It seems as though within this past 2 years, you've had exponential growth as it relates to your personal brand and ministry, as well as the church that you pastored in Louisville and now in Chicago South. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, even more than that, and I think that those are not necessarily byproducts of that season. I think those are byproducts of what happened because of those seasons.
Mhm.
To me, I experienced exponential growth in myself because of a right connection, because of a right DNA. And when I grew and my capacity grew, everything that I was connected with and covered grew as well. So I think sometimes we also got to look at like what's our motive for connections, because that's really the problem with a lot of the fathering stuff right now is fathers know that they are being abused for a come up.
Wow.
And so you're connecting to me, but you're connecting to me for a stage. I didn't ask for Chicago South. I
Wow.
didn't really even ask for All Nations, anything.
Right.
Those things were things that were put on the table for me when my capacity was expanded because of the right connections. And I think that that's where we just got to get into the motives of ourselves. Like, why really are you chasing this voice? Are you chasing this voice? And sometimes it's not even for platforms. Sometimes it's for inadequacies in yourself. It's for insecurities. You just want, and then if that is why you're attaching to people, you are automatically going to run into disappointment.
Wow.
Because when we attach to fathers for insecurity, then when our fathers have other assignments, we start to get insecure again.
Wow.
And so at that point, we build our own brand on our proximity to the voice we're connected to.
Absolutely.
And for me, one of the things that I've realized through this season is for my father, Dr. Matthew Stevenson. I was a bit of a this is weird language, but I was a bit of a rescue for him. And when I realized that that is a dominant part of his ministry is pulling people out of seasons that are locking them down and opening up new seasons for them, then I have to recognize that now that that has happened for me, I need to give him the space to go make that happen for somebody else, and not be the little one that's chomping at the heels, saying, "No, don't go out the door, don't leave, don't leave." We have to let those fathers leave and chase new assignments as well, or else we're just hogging that voice for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I like how you use the word capacity. And most people don't understand how important it is to build and to increase your capacity.
Mm,
When Jabez prayed a prayer that to help build his capacity. And he said, enlarge my territory. And that was really him speaking to the capacity of what was really happening on the inside of him. Because
mm,
before something can happen on the outside of you, it must first happen on the inside of you.
yeah,
And so the reality is the Josh Hart that people see today is the Josh Hart that was already on the inside. It didn't first happen on the outside and then happen on the inside. It was an inner working before it became an outside experience
absolutely.
to other people. And a lot of people don't take the time to develop their inner man, their inner person, their character, build their integrity. They just want to go forth. And like I said, they want to, like you said, they want to use people for stages. They want to just try to buddy and force their way into things that's not necessarily for them. And sometimes it's not that it's not for them, but it may not be for them in that moment, because at
Mm.
that moment in time, they don't have that capacity that they need in order to get in there and then sustain where they are. Because
I
a lot
mean,
of
think about. I don't. I'm
it's a
sorry.
fall.
No. Yeah, I don't mean to cut you off there, but think about how many people we've seen have cataclysmic falls
Yeah,
when once they got exposed to the country.
yeah,
They got exposed, they expanded, and then we saw their humanity. And I think so many times we're chasing for something. And one of the things that I've realized is a consistent prayer for me is, God, do not put me anywhere that there is something in me that's not ready to handle that.
absolutely.
Don't put me in any season. I don't care if it's something that is the desire of my heart. Don't give me the desire of my heart if I'm not ready to handle it from every angle, or if that angle is going to be detrimental to other angles I'm trying to protect. Because we've seen the people that press and press and press on this area and then lose their family, or they end up in divorce, or their kids end up going crazy, and all of those, I think, are things that people are chasing after and not looking at the holistic view of what an opportunity from God encapsulates.
Wow. It takes a mature person to be able to say, God, these are the desires of my heart, but if I'm not ready for them, don't give them to me. The prodigal son had asked his dad for a portion of his inheritance, but he never
Man,
said, but if I'm not ready for it, don't give it to me.
yeah.
The father recognized that it was a lesson that he needed to learn. So he only gave him a portion of what his total inheritance was. It wasn't the whole thing, but he went away and we saw that he wasted that portion that had been given to him. But he was able to go back and be mature enough when he came to himself, the Bible says,
Mm,
he was able to now go back and say, hey, I'm ready to come back home.
right, right.
This time he had a different disposition about himself, because he had learned from the mistakes that he made while out in the world doing his own thing and living the life that he thought he wanted, only to realize this isn't really it. This isn't really what God has for me. And I always ask people, or I challenge people, that when you're going after something, before you get that thing, and while you're praying, ask God, number one, God, is this the best that you have for me?
Mm,
Is this your best that you have for me?
yeah,
If this is your best that you have for me at this moment in time, am I ready to receive it at this moment?
yeah.
Can I handle it, or am I going to drop it? Is it going to fall, or am I going to have to sit up here and pray and believe and hope that you're going to give me another opportunity for
Right.
something great? If as preachers, we often have preaching goals, as we would say. So, for example, if I say, oh God, send me to the nation, send me to the world, I want to preach at the Potter's house, I want to preach for Woman Thou Art Loosed, I want to preach at Koza, I want to preach all these different places. The truth of the matter is, if God blesses me with that moment and in that opportunity, am I going to be able to handle and master that moment? Or unfortunately, am I going to fail and fall flat on my face because I was not ready at that particular time?
And I think we've got to be careful, just to piggyback on that, we've got to be careful of rescuing prodigals too early.
Mm,
I'll give you just a little bit, just an overview of my testimony. I had my raised in church, all those types of things. I had an extremely rebellious phase from 17 to 20. Wanted nothing to do with church, nothing to do with ministry, nothing to do with anything that had to do with God, period. And it was in me hitting rock bottom that caused me to realize that I, through decisions, had gotten myself not just out of destiny, but out of protection, out of out of the covering of God, out of the admonishment of God to my future. And I realized that I was waiting, essentially living every day waiting to die at that point. But had I not been allowed to go to the bottom because of the stubborn nature that I have as my humanity, had I not been allowed to go there, I would have never had that come to myself moment.
Mm.
And I've come to realize that with a lot of people, specifically that I deal with in scenarios like this, there is nothing that talks greater than pigs to prodigals.
Wow. Wow. That's
It,
powerful.
there is nothing that talks like a pig to a prodigal.
Wow.
All the people that had influence over him, all the people that were around him, nobody made him come to himself until he's laying next to a pig. And so I
Wow.
think we've got to allow some prodigals to journey for themselves, even if it takes them through the pain of pig slop. We've got to allow them to take that journey, because that journey at reaching rock bottom is where they recognize the only place I've got to go is back to God.
Wow. Let me shift the conversation, because I know we can talk about this.
Right.
We can shift this all day, but I find it amazing to me that you, as a white man or as a
Mm-hmm.
Caucasian man, has submitted yourself under a black man. And that's not common. That's not common things that we see. And with the racial divide that we see going on in the world and in the United States right now, I've heard conversations amongst preachers that say we will go sit under them, but they won't sit under us. And
Mm-hmm.
they really haven't sit under a person like us since Carlton Pearson, where Carlton Pearson had a very diverse, a very multi-ethnic church, as I call it, because multicultural means something different to me. But you are a white man. You come from a white family. You
Right.
pastor. I don't know if your church has always is predominantly white or was predominantly
Mm-hmm.
white, but whatever the case may be, you grew up in that, and then now, once your natural father, who was also your spiritual father, passed away in transition, your
Right.
now new spiritual father and the representation of who your original father was is now in that of a black man.
Mm-hmm.
How how did you even have a struggle with that, or did that ever even cross your mind? And of course, and I'm going to give this disclaimer: no,
Right.
I don't think you're racist or anything like that.
Right. Right.
I know sometimes people have a challenge of that. I say Robert Morris, Pastor Robert Morris of Gateway
Mm-hmm.
Church in Texas. I heard a recent conversation where he said his daughter, when she was younger, she was playing with a black boy, and it was in that moment. Although he's not racist, he said God asked him, "Okay, I know you like black people, but would you be okay if your daughter married a black man?" And he said it was at that moment that God was working on his heart to make
Mm.
him realize that he still kind of had a little bit of prejudice
Yeah.
in, in his heart that he had to work through, because he liked black people, he pastored black people. But now we're talking about integrating families and all these other things that kind of come with that. And God asked him, would he be okay with that? And he went and he did a whole little journey. And now, years later, his wife is married to a black man. They have they have a wonderful family and wonderful children, and these are his grandchildren. And he fully addressed in his church the things that are going on in society. Did
Mm.
you have an issue when it came down to race with submitting to Apostle Stevenson?
Well, I always make the disclaimer before these types of conversations that I'm a terrible spokesperson for white people, so I don't ever ascribe to be that. Um, but at the same time, I think what I have to say does need to be heard by a Caucasian grouping. My church was, as far as from my grandfather and my father's era, was about 50-50.
Mm.
It was very close as far as Caucasian and African American. Um, I took a much more aggressive approach on the racial conversation. And I'll be honest, I went to about 90-10
Wow.
once my rhetoric came to the surface. And it was around the time when I really started getting aggressive with it, was around the time of the Philando Castile and those murders several years ago.
Mm.
But I have
Uh-oh.
Conversation needs to go much farther than that, where we can't just raise our children to not be racist. We've got to raise them to confront racism.
Mm.
And so I think we have a whole lot of people that have black friends, but won't stand up when black friends get confronted
Wow.
in a cultural conversation. As far as the thing with Dr. Matthew Stevenson, I recognize it never really was an issue for me. I recognize probably the weight of that decision more in scenarios like we're in right now. When I start to look around and realize that I am in a very large minority of Caucasians that are submitted to an African American man,
Yeah.
it's not just a statement, it is data that it is easier to build a multicultural church, multi-ethnic church. It is easier to build that as a white leader than it is as an African American leader. The conversation then I think needs to shift into the prejudice of people. I have a very strong thought about what multiculturalism is doing to the church conversation,
Mm.
because right now multicultural is the second thing you see after the church name on websites, but it's not the first thing we see when we come to your church.
Wow.
And when the experience is declared to be multicultural, I should see multiple cultures. But what we do is take one culture and say everybody integrate.
Yep.
Um, and essentially, it's following the American model, which was integration when out of segregation. The really, if you look at it, and this is maybe going down too far of a track if you want to, but really, one of the things that Martin Luther King went in requesting initially was not integration; it was separation.
Mm.
It was the ability to have setups just like the Native Americans had, where we can govern ourselves, we can police ourselves, we can set our own rules, and we'll interact with everybody else, but we want to be able to govern ourselves. And the what they were offered in place of that was segregation. And there while that has brought all of us together, what it has really done, which social media is confronting now, is it's really made America be white and African Americans be black, and we'll give you a couple things.
Mm.
And that's where I think we have to look at the idea of even integration and say, really, we didn't offer what we should have offered in integration. And I see the same thing happening in our churches, where we'll say we want to have multiple cultures represented. But generally, when we say multicultural, the only thing that you're going to see multicultural is a little bit of a change in music.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's majority, it's the use of the black sound.
Absolutely.
Um, and when that is the case, because I do believe that African Americans have a key, a specific key in praise and worship, in the way that they engage that. But when you look at the power of the songs that the white culture wants to use, and I say these words, that the white culture wants to use, a, a lot of it is the reason there's power in it is because they were written out of the pain of those people. And so, really, it's us being able to grab a hold of the power from that pain while never attaching ourselves to the current pain that is going on now. And so,
Wow.
to me, it's the abuse of the black church when you
Mm.
build a multicultural setup that doesn't present multicultures. And I'll tell you, the number one thing is you're going to see in these multicultural churches is a church that'll celebrate Memorial Day, that'll celebrate July 4th, that'll celebrate Veterans Day, it will celebrate Columbus Day, but won't celebrate Black History Month.
Wow. Wow.
That to me is the number one indicator that you are running into a space that declares to be multicultural, but we're really wanting you to become us.
I love it. And it goes back to that whole idea of we use the term multicultural, but what we're really saying is multi-ethnic because
Ethnic.
different ethnic groups represented here, but we're not representing cultures. With representing culture, there comes being able to identify the problems and the issues that they're facing, and
Mm-hmm.
being able to incorporate how they worship. One thing that I love to see was prophetess Juanita Bynum. She had preached on an Indian reservation. They were a Christian
Mm.
Indian reservation. And I wish there was a full clip available or anything like that, but there was only a short clip to just show how they worshiping again the same God, the same Christ, but just so different from a white worship or a black worship, anything of that nature. And they've invited this woman now to come on who is fully black. We all are familiar with her ministry,
Right.
and they were able to bridge the culture, and they
Yeah.
both present in the room, and the glory and the power of God still fell. We often feel like the power and the glory of God can only fall based on how we want it to fall and what we're comfortable and what we're used to. So if we're not hand clapping, if we're not toe tapping, or if we're not in some deep dark sanctuary with fancy lights and smoke
Mm.
machines, God can't come in, which is
Yeah.
absolutely not the case. One thing that I was focused on when I was in prayer and I was just kind of meditating this morning is about how we are carriers of God's glory, and understanding that we carry that glory wherever we go, and it can manifest at any given time in any given way. And I can be at Walmart, as somebody said to me, between the pickles and the mayonnaise, and glory take the time to really manifest itself right
Mm.
then, because his glory is waiting to be revealed in the earth realm. And I want to
Absolutely.
encourage any of you who's on this broadcast today, and I want to let you know that you are a glory carrier. I don't care what you've been through, I don't care what you've done, whatever the case may be. God is waiting for his glory to be manifested and to shine through you. When you leave this broadcast and get off this broadcast today, go. I want to challenge every one of you. Go carry God's glory. Carry it, and not only in your church, but carry it in your home. Carry
Yeah.
it place of employment. Carry it while you're at the store, because people need to see God's glory represented now even more than ever. There is a call for God's glory. That's why the Bible says that the creature is waiting for the manifestation of true sons and daughters. And those true sons and daughters are people who are not afraid to carry God's glory. And I don't know
Absolutely.
about you, but I'm proud to be a glory carrier. Pastor Josh is a glory carrier. And I'm telling you, you need to begin to learn what it means to really carry God's glory. And once you carry his glory, we'll actually solve a lot of the problems
Absolutely.
in the world today.
Yeah, I think we're seeing the testing of this that a lot of us are failing right now
Right.
in the pandemic that we're seeing. I think when we have a COVID-19 pandemic that shuts church buildings down, um, here's what I really believe this. I believe that while it may not be the overall goal of it, anything that happens around me is at least partially for me. I believe. So I believe that a lot of this home church thing that we've been experiencing has been God trying to provoke authentic participation with His glory. Essentially, is your church behavior good in every environment?
Absolutely.
Um, and it really is the goal of the kingdom. When you look at what ecclesia was, which is the word for church.
Absolutely.
Ecclesia was the word used by Caesar for the gathering of the governors to get information to go do their jobs.
Absolutely.
What we use the church for now is a bunch of salvation calls. Now, I'm about to get into something that's important to me right here. Because I believe if we build our church specifically for the altar call to salvation, then we have an entire segment of people who have already given their life to Christ, who are now just being walked to the man who declared himself to be the door. And we drop people off at the doorstep every week and never open up the door and show them what's on the other side.
I
You
love
have
it.
to look at the idea of really Jesus preaching two different gospels. He preached the gospel of salvation and the gospel of the kingdom, and they were not simultaneous. The gospel of salvation was the working of the blood on the cross. That was all in the hands of Jesus. I'm going to work this out. Grace is going to cover you. Mercy is going to be new every morning. All of those things are working. That is the gospel of salvation. The gospel of the kingdom is essentially what's next. And to me, the gospel of the kingdom is what is supposed to be happening in our churches, which is building people to go and expand this influence into the entire world, which means now that if I have a job, I don't have that job because it pays me $3 more than this one. I have this job because I'm on assignment there to expand the kingdom to that world. When you talk about the kingdom of heaven, which I'm preaching to the choir on this, but when you talk about the kingdom of heaven, you're not talking about heaven, the place. You're talking about its influence in the earth. You're talking about two different things when you talk about those. So there's the heaven that is the abode of God. It's the third place that John went to in Revelation. But when you talk about the kingdom of heaven, if you just follow the track of that being a literal place, it don't even
Yeah,
make sense in scriptures.
it
So
doesn't make sense.
the kingdom of heaven is the influence of the place coming into the earth. But even at that, it's not falling in a cloud. It's not falling in gold dust. It's rising in our bellies. So at that point, the kingdom going into the earth in every one of those atmospheres is going to be because people have been trained in ecclesia to
Yeah.
be the governors, the ambassadors, if you will, as far as the scriptural term, the ambassadors now sent to the neighborhood, sent to second shift, sent to that family line, sent to that bloodline, and even sent to that church to do specific things and accomplish specific things in the earth. And that's where I think we're missing it, is we're doing a bunch of church services and our goal is salvation, when really that goal should be in the streets. The goal of salvation should be in the grocery aisle. Salvation should be happening, not, and we have trained, oh, Lord Jesus, okay. We have trained a bunch of immature believers because
My,
we allow them to cop out and say, your experience with the kingdom can become, listen to my pastor and he's going to preach you to salvation. When that salvation experience, they should look at you and admonish him. They should look at your life and give God glory because of what they see on you. And when the salvation experience is happening more in the street than it is in the church, then the church can become what it's supposed to be, which is the place where we grow, where we expand, where we become more, so that way we can be fruitful, multiply, subdue the earth, and have dominion.
I love it. You know who my mama is. So
Right,
we can
absolutely.
do this all day. I love it. You stirring me up, and I ain't even want to do all this today. But it's amazing because people don't often understand the purpose of the church. And when we look at the Bible in Ephesians 3:11, I often read it from the NLT version because
Mhm.
that's one that most people understand. It just breaks it down and makes it very plain, where Paul says, I was chosen to explain this to everyone. This mysterious plan that God, the creator of all things, had kept secret from the beginning. It says God's purpose in all of this was to use the church, here we go, to display his wisdom in its rich variety to all the unseen rulers and authorities. There we go. We talk about the government in the heavenly
Right.
places. His eternal plan, which he carried out through Christ Jesus our Lord. I feel like if we now can take this moment of a COVID-19 and really reflect on past practices and
Yeah.
what we've done and where we've been before, and really understand what our purpose is now, we can literally, how I would say, rebrand the church
Mm.
to not only be something different, but to be what it really should have been the entire time. We understand that the church is the educational institution of the kingdom of God.
Absolutely.
We understand that people have to come there so that they can be educated by a new kingdom paradigm and shift their mindset. But it's
Yep.
so many people who go to church and they go just for good music and they go just to hear, just to see some people, which, and I'm not knocking any of that. But
Right.
when you
Right.
leave church, my question is often, what have you been equipped and empowered to do? And
Well,
if you just go and you live your life,
yeah.
and you just go to work and you go to sleep and you spend time with your family and then you just right back at church the next Sunday, but you don't really have any other fruit manifesting from what
Listen.
you learned in church, what's
Listen.
the purpose?
Listen, and a lot of times I think this is a part of the American church play. It may be broader than this, but for sure the American church play is we will give our offerings to hire professionals to do ministry for us. But if you look at Ephesians 4, it says he gave some to be apostles, talking about Christ, some to be evangelists, some to be prophets, some to be pastors, some to be teachers, and he gave them to equip the saints for works of ministry. The reason they have been given is to train you to go do ministry. And what
Yeah,
we do in the American church is we come attend ministry. We attend a ministry and let them do the work for us. So,
yeah,
Pastor, I'm gonna bring my unsaved husband. I'm gonna bring my unsaved nephew. I'm gonna bring my friend, and I want you to preach a good sermon so that they want to give their life to Christ. My question is, what have you been doing that has not drawn them to Christ if you are filled with the kingdom that's supposed to be attracting them? And it may not necessarily be on you. It may be on who's training you.
I like it. I be on who's training you. And I think it's so easier to give the responsibility to someone else
For
because
sure.
what happens is when it doesn't work out or when it fails and it doesn't happen the way we want it to, we now can point the finger instead of doing some self-reflection on
Mm.
what we did or did not do. And so as we prepare to wrap up this conversation, which has absolutely been absolutely amazing. We're definitely going to have it again.
For
I
sure.
want you to pretty much give a prophetic insight on what you see coming next for the church, and not even necessarily the church, but even in the future as we move forward. I know people are talking about a second wave, which we see happening in some states already. I know
Mhm.
people are just talking about different things, and people are worried about what's getting ready to happen with AI, the new technology that's coming forward, and
Right.
everything that's ready to take place. Can you go ahead, give some prophetic insight and some wisdom concerning what you see as it relates to the future and what's coming next?
Yeah, so I will say, first of all, with the pandemic thing, I think we've got to be a people who are spiritual and wise. There is a spirit of wisdom. I believe a lot of what happens in the earth, I don't believe God sent this pandemic.
Mm,
I know that's a lot of the rhetoric. Is this the judgment of God? I believe that God can use a pandemic. I believe that He can use it to further His plans. But when it happens, I believe that God is using it to provoke the church. I've been saying this for a little bit now. I said this at the beginning of this political term, that I believe God was getting ready to take America on a track where America had to be humbled again to the place where she recognized that her only hope was in that of Christ and the kingdom. I think that we, even as the church culture, have gotten a little bit too high, to the point where have been attempting to do church without Christ. I think and we're part of a lights move. We got lights all in our churches. We got smoke. We got fog. We got all that stuff. But I believe that we've been duping people out of the fact that there's no glory by what we've been presenting. And my thing is, I think Christ has been trying to get back in his church for some time. And if that is the case, I think what we are fighting against right now as a kingdom movement is an anti-Christ Christian agenda.
mm,
And it is something that I think we've got to keep our eye on. Is there is a lot of doctrines. Some of it is in political language, some of it is in racial language, some of it is in the way things are presented, but there is an antichrist agenda that has been loosed in the earth, that is active in the church, that he is actively coming against, in my perspective.
mm.
I think with the pandemic, as far as a second wave, I'm a big advocate of hand sanitizer and masks, and I don't think that that is a lack of faith. I don't
Absolutely.
think that that is. I don't think that that is. I don't trust in God, because I'm gonna stay 3 feet away if you sneeze. So for me, I believe that we've got to use wisdom. The reason I say that is because in the original intent of God in the earth with the kingdom, he gave man dominion in the earth. Because of that, I believe that the outbreaks that we see, whether it be violence, whether it be illness, whether it be sickness, any of those things, are man's decisions, which means that man filled with the kingdom has to be the thing that confronts it. For
Wow.
us, I think we've got to recognize that when God gave authority to man in the earth, he meant it. When he
Absolutely.
gave man dominion in the earth, he meant it so much so that when it came time to save man, he had to wrap himself in man to make it happen.
Wow.
God literally declared man has dominion in the earth, so much so that when he wants to fix it, because of his declaration, the only way it's going to be fixed is for him to become what he gave dominion. So he wraps himself in flesh because that's the only thing that can affect change in the earth. So that means for his kingdom to get in the earth, we have got to recognize that this is not us posturing ourselves in a wait that is just waiting for the sky to crack and God to release angels to just chop people's heads off and stuff.
Mm.
This stuff is not going to happen. The way that we are going to release the kingdom agenda into the earth is when we recognize that the kingdom is in our bellies.
Yeah,
So for
absolutely.
us, that to me is the point of this entire thing, is for the church to recognize that you are not a building,
Yeah.
you're not a community gathering. You're not a social gathering. You're not something that is there just to help people emotionally. The only way that change is going to come into the earth is when the thing that God put himself in releases him out here. So we've
Wow.
got to dispatch angels. When it talks about angels being loosed in the earth, that's why I said we can't wait for angels to come. When it talks about in Psalms, I can't remember the chapter right now, but it says that angels hearken the voice of the word of God. Now,
Mm,
if God is going to speak in the earth right now, it's going to be through us. He put
absolutely.
himself in us. So that means that even in the warring spiritually, those angels are sitting on the sideline waiting for something to do because the voice of the word is not speaking the word.
Wow.
All we're speaking is what we're seeing. We're being over inundated. And I believe that you should be educated in what's going on. I believe that you should watch what's happening. I'm not the guy that says turn off the news and just pray. I believe you need to be knowing what to pray about. I
Absolutely.
believe you need to be watching, but I don't believe you should be declaring what you're seeing. I believe you should be declaring answers to what you're watching. And what I'm watching the church do is talk about the problem and not release the answers. The answers are going to come, and it's not just going to be in strategy, it's going to be in the release of the spiritual thing that we have been filled with in our belly, which is the kingdom of heaven in the earth in us.
I love it.
Out of our bellies will flow rivers of living water. If
Yes, sir.
life is going to come into the earth, it's going to come through our belly. So we've got to stop. And that's why I've been telling people, I got the shirt on right now. I preach and I protest. We've
Yeah.
got to protest. We've got to get out. We've got to get out and vote. We've got to do these things. It is a mandate to do the natural activity while we're engaging spiritually. But what I've been admonishing people is don't forget to pray.
Yeah.
Don't
Don't forget.
forget to engage that spirit side. If anything, that is the secret attack that we have as the kingdom. I can send my word behind enemy lines that my body will never let me go to. So I'm
Mm.
going to attack it with a vote, but I'm going to send angels to the White House.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think we have to make sure that we are walking this thing out holistically. We have to not be so over inundated with natural information that we don't release spirit answers. The kingdom is waiting to be released into the earth, and it's waiting on us. We sitting back waiting on God. It's waiting on us.
I love it, man. You have just blessed me so much. And like you already know, we can talk about the kingdom all.
Yeah, I know.
And if we get into that prayer vein, like we can, you already know. It just is what it is. I'm so grateful for this conversation. And I'm grateful that, again, you came on today. And if any of you who are tuned in today were blessed by Pastor Josh, I'm going to ask that you bless him. I'm going to ask that you give to his Cash App, which is on the bottom of your screen at $PJ Hart, HART 87. So, again, that's $PJ Hart 87. If you're blessed by what I'm doing every Wednesday with these special guests, you can also sow seed to me. You already know how to give. $4 Square Agency. There are so many things that are happening in the world today. And I want to encourage each and every one of you as I wrap up that God has need of you, that the kingdom needs your voice, and that what God is anointing in this season is voices to stand up and to rise up and to speak out as it relates to what is going on and what is to come. There are so many things to come. God is calling on all of you who know you have that prophetic unction. You have that mantle on the inside of you. God needs the prophets to prophesy. And just as I spoke when I was on the Word Network, I'm telling you, America is going to begin to call for the voice of the prophets, and you're going
Yep.
to see the prophets be invited on major and national platforms, and you're going to see people ask the prophets, what is going to happen next? What is the word of the Lord for the country and for the world today? And if you are a person who has that mandate, you have that mantle, I'm telling you, you better get ready. You better prepare yourself and posture and position yourself, because literally when you see it begin to happen, I just want you to come back and say, Eric, you said it was happening, because y'all gonna give me my credit, because I know what I see and I see what I know.
Listen.
I'm trying to tell somebody here, y'all gonna give me my credit. But seriously, go ahead and be that voice. Be exactly who God has called you to be. Allow yourself to manifest in the earth realm, because people have need of you. And I tell people all the time, you are the leader that someone is waiting on.
Yeah.
Someone in the earth realm is waiting on you to do what God has called you to do. So you better stop waiting on somebody else to do it, because God has given you the mandate and God has given you the challenge. So
Absolutely.
Pastor John, guys, thank you so much for coming on.
Man,
Guys, you
thanks
can
for having
go
me.
the official YouTube channel at Eric J. Thomas. Follow Pastor Josh on all social media at Josh M. Hart on Instagram, Josh Hart on Facebook. You will see him with all this cool profile picture with the
Okay. Okay.
all that other stuff, and you'll see him suited up and booted up. I gotta get on your level, man. I seen the fashion. I said, oh, I gotta step my game up.
Okay.
I gotta step it up. You already came on here with the Bulls hat on and the glasses. I just gotta catch up. I gotta
Hilarious.
catch up. Yeah. But thank you guys for tuning on. Until next time, I'm Eric J. Thomas. This is Pastor Hart. Follow him, connect with him, and you already know how to get in touch with me at Eric J. Thomas on all social media. And I will get with you guys soon. Till next time, peace on out.
See ya.